It was -10 degrees Celsius on Christmas Eve. My father didn't just ruin dinner, he deleted my existence. For the crime of asking why he was spending my late grandmother's missing inheritance on a new Porsche while I struggled to pay rent, he showed me the door. The deadbolt clicked, a cold, metallic finality that I stood on the porch, my breath hitching in the crystalline air. Inside, the house was a golden lantern of warmth. I watched through the frosted glass as they toasted to a new beginning, my stepmother laughing while she carved the turkey I bought. My feet, clad only in thin socks, began to lose feeling. I used the welcome mat to keep my skin from sticking to the ice. It was a lie. I wasn't welcome. That I need to know I'm not alone. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Let's get through this together. Because when you're freezing, the silence doesn't just get quiet. It gets heavy. The vibration started in the ground before I saw the light. A silver Rolls-Royce, silent as a falling snowflake, drifted up the driveway like a ghost reclaiming its territory. It didn't belong in this neighborhood of McMansions, it belonged in a history book. The engine cut, and the world went still. The rear door didn't just open, it swung wide with a heavy, expensive grace. Out stepped a woman who should have been 6 feet under. Grandmother Eleanor. 3 years ago, my father gave her a closed-casket funeral. He told the bank she was gone. He told me her heart had simply stopped. But as she stepped onto the frozen gravel, her eyes, sharp as diamonds and twice as hard, locked onto mine. She wasn't a ghost. She was a reckoning. She looked at my shivering frame, then at the house she had built with her own hands. Eleanor. I rasped, the ice in my throat cracking. She didn't hug me. She simply said, "Get in the car, Arya." The dead have a way of coming back when their pockets are being picked. The interior of the Rolls-Royce was a sanctuary of climate-controlled vengeance. The air smelled of cedar and old money. Eleanor didn't offer me tea or a blanket, she handed me a tablet. The screen glowed with a live feed of my father's offshore accounts. "He didn't kill me," she said, her voice a low, rhythmic rasp. "He just tried to archive me." She explained that science of her disappearance with the cold detachment of a forensic accountant. He had drugged her, moved her to a private, wellness retreat, in the Swiss Alps, and bribed a corrupt coroner to sign a piece of paper. He thought he could keep her in a chemical fog until her assets were drained. But Eleanor wasn't a victim, she was a strategist. She had spent 3 years faking her decline, slowly rerouting her shadow accounts until she had enough to buy the very security team he thought he employed. "He thinks he's a lion," she whispered, watching my shivering hands. "But he's just a scavenger eating a corpse that hasn't stopped breathing yet." We didn't use the doorbell. Eleanor walked toward the entrance, and the smart locks, the ones my father bragged were unhackable, chirped in submission. The biometrics hadn't forgotten the hand that paid for them. We stepped into the foyer, a blast of heat meeting the blizzard clinging to my coat that I and the dining room. The scene was a portrait of stolen luxury. My father, Marcus, was standing by the fireplace, mid-toast, his face flushed with the arrogance of a man who thought he'd gotten away with it. The glass froze at his lips. The color didn't just leave his face, it evaporated. He looked at Eleanor as if the floor had opened into a grave. "Mother," he choked out, the crystal tumbler slipping from his hand and shattering on the marble. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crackle of a fire he no longer owned. Eleanor didn't yell. She simply walked to the head of the table and leaned in. "You're sitting in a dead woman's chair, Marcus. Stand up before I make the metaphor permanent that it's a glitch," Marcus stammered, his eyes darting toward the door. "You're not supposed to be here." He tried to play the grieving son, but Eleanor's lawyer, a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite, stepped forward. He didn't offer a handshake, he opened a leather dossier. Every vacation, every Porsche, every diamond on his wife's wrist was listed in a column of red ink. "The death certificate was your shield," the lawyer said, his voice as flat as a dial tone. "But since the decedent is currently breathing your air, every cent you've spent in 3 years is now a federal felony. It's not an inheritance, Marcus. It's a paper trail of grand larceny." I watched my father's empire dissolve in the light of the chandelier. He wasn't a CEO, he was a squatter in a house built on a lie. Eleanor leaned over the table, her shadow stretching long and dark. "I'm not auditing your accounts, Marcus," she whispered. "I'm auditing your soul. And you're bankrupt." The extraction was swift. My father didn't get to pack a bag. The security team handled him with the same clinical indifference he'd shown me in the snow. I watched from the warmth of the foyer as the three of them, Marcus, his wife, and their pride, were ushered toward the driveway. They didn't even get to keep their coats. "Those were purchased with estate funds," Eleanor remarked, sipping a vintage red. "And the estate is currently closed for business." The front door swung shut, the heavy thud echoing like a gavel. I walked to the window and pulled the heavy velvet drapes, erasing the sight of him shivering in the dark. The cold hadn't broken me, it had tempered me. I wasn't the daughter seeking approval anymore. I was the survivor who had inherited the fire. "Welcome to the real world, Marcus," I whispered to the glass. "It's -10 degrees Celsius out there. Try not to freeze. If you've ever had to find your own light in the dark, subscribe. We're just getting started."